Hi everyone, I told y'all I would do a short Inkscape tutorial on how to make knots and braids and surfaces in Inkscape, and so here it is. I am not a YouTuber, so this is probably going to be a little unpolished, but bear with me. My main goals are I want to show you enough that you can play around with it by yourself, and two, I don't want to take up too much of your time. This is hopefully going to be like 10-15 minutes max. So why Inkscape? Because I know some of you all have been playing around with ticks. So let's start there and start with, why Inkscape and how to get it. So Inkscape is a vector graphics software. It is a competitor to Adobe Illustrator, except it's free and open source. So the nice thing about using vector graphics is that they are scalable, but as opposed to ticks where you have to sort of code where you want things to be, Inkscape is more you sort of directly say, like put things down like you're drawing in, Microsoft Paint or something like that. So it is usually faster and you can get some pretty nice diagrams and you don't have to learn a whole new language if you don't already know ticks. So it is available for all major operating systems, so Linux, Windows, Mac. Just a heads up, the Mac is actually kind of an early version for the new for the new Mac OS. So if you have like what is it, Catalina or something, it's actually going to be Inkscape 2.0, which is maybe a little slower, but it's still usable. So, let's see, now I'm going to share Inkscape. Hold on a minute. Okay. So hopefully you can see Inkscape now. So maybe I'll just share my whole screen just to make sure there's no issues here. Okay, so here's what Inkscape looks like. So I know there's a lot of different buttons and things to look at, but really for the things that we need to know, we're not professional graphic designers, right? We're just trying to make diagrams for a paper. So the first thing I'm going to say is that opening a new document, the size probably doesn't matter. Really, you want it to just be big enough that you have room to play around, and then you can crop later to what you need. Okay, so here's where I start. So the most important tools for me are this one that says draw Bezier curves and straight lines, and this one that lets you edit nodes. So I'm just going to go ahead and start, and hopefully you'll get a feel for what this looks like. So let's say I want to draw a knot. Let's say I want to draw the trefoil. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to draw it polygonally without adding any crossings first. So maybe if you squint and look real hard, that's kind of like a trefoil. So here's a couple of things that I want to do. First, this looks really thin, so it's going to be not as easy to see and maybe it doesn't look quite as professional. So the first thing I usually do is I change the stroke. So you can see there's a lot of different options. You can fill it. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. You can change the color. But for me, I'm going to change the stroke style. And usually I end up going with about 5 pixels. For me, that's like kind of thick enough to see what's going on and it scales nicely. Okay, so far this still doesn't look like a trefoil. So here's what we're going to do, or what I do at least. So first I smooth everything. So maybe I'll select all the nodes. So click Edit Paths by Nodes. You can either select them all manually and smooth them like that, or if you want to be fancy, you could do Control All and smooth them all at once. Okay, so it's starting to look a little more trefoily. And now, how do you get the crossings? So you see these double points now. So let's say I want this to be the understrand. So what I do is I double click to add a new node, and then when I have Edit Path by Nodes selected, I go up to the top. You should hover over. There's a lot of different options. So there's Insert New Nodes, which you can click that or you can double click. There's Delete Selected Nodes, there's Join, and there's Split. So those are useful, and I think these different ways of smoothing are useful, but we're trying to create an undercrossing, so let's split now. So I created that new node. So now I'm going to break the path at that node, and look what happens. Now I can pull them apart. And actually, I guess that was pretty close already, so I'm just going to delete that one and pull this close. And hey, look, now there's a crossing there. And we can go around and do the same thing at all of these, right? So that went under there. So now this one should probably go under. So I'm going to take that, add a node, and then split it open. Okay, and then this, I really don't even need to add a new node, right? Because there's already one that was kind of close to what I need it to be. Oh no, that's the wrong strand. So let's add one here, and then split that open. And maybe that's starting to look a little gross, so maybe I'll click to smooth that guy again. And look, pretty sweet trefoil for like a minute, right? It's probably a lot faster than ticks. So you can fiddle with this. You can fiddle with this and kind of change how you want to your taste. If you want to indicate that this thing is oriented, maybe what you can do is click on the create stars and polygons thing and think about, well, a triangle is just a three-pointed star, really. So you could draw a little star there, maybe indicate orientation like that, and that's a pretty quick and decent looking little trefoil. Okay, so you can do the same thing for braids if you need like a, if you're drawing a braid and you really want to show like where it starts, or you have like a singular crossing. I know some of y'all are doing that. You could always indicate that with a circle, and you can keep it a perfect circle by holding down, I think should be control. If you hold down control and you drag it, it'll either be a circle or it'll be a pretty nice looking ellipse. So there, you just have to play around with it, figure out what you want to do. Let's see. Okay, so I promised you that I was also going to talk about how to do surfaces. So here, I'm going to show you how I do surfaces. If you find something that works better for you, go ahead and do it. So I'm going to draw the Seifert surface for this trefoil. So for those of you who don't know, a Seifert surface for a trefoil or for a knot is an oriented surface whose boundary is the knot. So there's an algorithm for doing this. I'm not going to go through that. If you're curious, you can look it up. But the important thing is I want to draw something whose boundary is that knot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use layers. So go to the menu, go to layers. Right now, there's sort of implied just one layer that everything is happening in. So I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to add it below the current one. And maybe I'll call this surface. And here's what I'm going to do. And I can be real sloppy with this. So I'm going to click this Bezier curves thing again. And I'm going to sort of outline where I want parts of the surface to be. So just for reference, the surface for a trefoil is going to look like a disc on top and a disc on bottom. And those two discs are going to be connected with 3 twisted bands, one for each crossing. So I'm going to draw the top disc first. So here's what I'm going to do. Handle to cusp node is selected. I guess I should probably unselect that if possible. I don't really want to have to figure this out on the fly here. You can Google how to do that. Maybe it's under document properties. Okay, snap to objects. Yeah, so I lower the snap distance. Yeah, snap to objects and snap to grids and snap to guides, just so I have a little more flexibility in what I can do. Okay, so now what was I trying to do? I was trying to draw the disc. So I outline this a little bit like that. And then I'm just going to edit these nodes just because I've done this a lot and I know that this is probably the right thing to do. And I'm going to edit that one. Okay. Maybe I want it to fit a little bit so I can sort of drag this handle. And here's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to fill this. So let's say I want my surface to be green. Okay, so I'm going to fill that. And maybe I'll have it have no stroke, so there's no sort of edge on that surface, other than the knot. And here's a trick that I like using a lot. I'll actually change the opacity. So the reason I do that is that that means that if I have disks on top of each other, then the one on top will be darker because it's layering opacities, and so I can actually do less work to show depth. So I'm going to change the opacity to like 30. That's usually been pretty good for me. Okay, so that's like the top disk. And then now I'm going to create a new layer yet again. So maybe I'll say like lower part of surface. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. So just sort of outline the region that we have. A little more complicated than the top disk, but that's okay. All right, now I'm going to smooth what I need to. So maybe I'll select everything I want to smooth. Notice I'm going to leave these little corners alone. Okay. So all right, and we're going to fill that. Should be on the same color, but now let's do opacity 30. So you see what I mean? Now it's automatically, I'm going to remove this stroke. Now it's automatically showing that that disk on top is on top, right? Just because of how the opacity is layering. So this is, you don't have to do it this way. But for me, like this is a kind of lazy way of making this work. Maybe this opacity is actually a little too high. Maybe that looks a little better. Okay, and now the final pieces, those are just two disks. So now we got to make these bands clear. And I'm going to add in these bands. So here's a band, or part of a band, right? The other part is up here. So fill that with the same color. Make the opacity lighter to match the other thing. Remove the stroke. And you can see there's like a little gap here, so maybe I want to fix that right there. Okay. And there you go. So let's go around and do it for the other two. a little bit just to be nice. Okay, and finally, the last one. And there you go. That took really barely any time. There are some things that you can do if you want to, like, I don't know, make it look a little friendlier. Like you could add a node there and smooth it and then have, this be kind of like that if you want. Um, this is really just a matter of taste, but what you should see is that this is a lot quicker than Tix is going to be, and it looks a lot cleaner and more professional than trying to draw it by hand. So there you go. There's a knot with its with a Seifert surface for the knot. So this is really all the tools that I need. And most topologists, I think, need an Inkscape. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.